Sometimes when a game is a little bit abstract, it requires some heavy tutorialisation for the player to understand A, what you're supposed to be doing, B, how you do it, and C, what the rules of engagement for the game is. Now, Masterplan Tycoon is one such game that goes heavy on the tutorialisation. It's a resource management game where you have to keep pooling your resources together like Factorio, but in flowchart form is probably the best way to describe this. A real pared down resource management game. The flip side though is that Masterplan Tycoon never stops tutorialising, and so several hours into the game, indeed the entire length of the game, the next thing for you to do is drip fed in front of you without you ever having to think or feel for yourself. And this in turn means that you are railroaded into one very specific way to play, and you're not really allowed to think or feel for yourself and to go off and try other experimental ways of doing something. This game has been designed to be played one way and one way only, and if you want to have some freedom in what you want to do in building up your Masterplan Tycoon, then I'm afraid to say you're going to be very disappointed. And that's a shame, because Masterplan Tycoon actually has an awful lot going for it. You start off right at the very beginning with some water and perhaps some fish, and the idea is that you're building a settlement and starting to build your civilization as you go, but it's done in a top-down blueprint style format where each of the kind of decision nodes are resources that have an area of effect usually around them. And the idea is that you then use the nodes that are going out to drag them across and connect them to the nodes going in of whatever else you need to kind of connect the chain to make the resource. And then they'll all flow into storage units usually, which contains all of your planks, your stones, your bricks, your concrete, your windows, but also other things like wool, pigs, and moonshine and all kinds of different things, bamboo. It keeps going and going and going, and the longer you go into the game, the more types of resources you have to offer and the more things that you need to collect and balance, because as you go up the tiers of different resources, it requires other earlier resources to make them work. And so for instance, early on you'll be asked to make some bread, so you'll need some farming for some grains, and then you'll need a bakery to kind of translate it into the bread that it makes. But each of those buildings requires resources to get the workers up and running, water and fish, and so you'll need some more of those. But those farms then start to be multi-purposed, and so you might be able to combine that with some pig farms to then start to get some sausages, for example, that then allow you to then unlock and deal with bigger buildings. But the more of those buildings you make, they start to steal from the grain and then from the water and the fish, and so you're constantly backpedaling out so that you can sustain your growth through this pyramid scheme of resources as you go along. Now the game goes after the initial half hour, it doesn't really tell you too much about needing to go back in time and building up your resources and making sure that you do it all again. But what it does do is say, oh, do you know what? I think we need X now, and oh, we need Y now, and oh, you can't do this until you've satisfied X criteria here, here, and here. And so what you aren't allowed to do is kind of experiment away from the map and unlock things in different orders, for example, or build things in different orders. Because if you decide to get some moonshine up and running before it asks you to in the tutorial, it totally ignores everything that you've done beforehand and you have to build it again. And so that then means that you're locked into sometimes having to do things twice, and then that will sap your resources as you go along. That tutorialization is also built into the overarching one map of the game itself. You have this master plan that you're constantly moving across the world, kind of taking over and using all of the resources as you go. But in order to kind of stunt your progress and force you into certain funnels, there are mission blocks that you need to then unlock. And then you dive into those and it will take you out to little sub areas with small little challenges in, and that does break up the monotony of the game somewhat, because it usually unlocks some new resources that allow you to then have access to the next tier of resources higher up the chain. And it starts to get much more interesting at the 3 hour mark, because you start to unlock different variations. You don't get forests, you get bamboo forests. You don't get farmers or wool or anything like that. You get banana farms, for example. And then you start to unlock like alternative cuisines and things like that. And it's variations on a theme, but it continues to just colour in the world and make things a little bit less, not monotonous, but it keeps that variety going so that it feels like you're doing more than you actually are, which is an odd thing and an odd compliment to give to a game. However, the longer you go into this game, the more quality of life features start to slap you in the face and get you quite frustrated. The main ones for me, and there's two specifically, and they both relate to connectivity of chords between different nodes that you've got. So you have free range to move around all of the different blocks that provide the resources for you. But the connecting chords, as you like connect up the flowchart going through the game itself, they are very specific in the way how they connect out together. And you can't let the chord go through any of the other kind of big boxes. And so you're constantly given like red incorrect nodes everywhere. And so you start like maneuvering things around, but it's literally by one square to try and make things work. And then you'll put something else down and you'll realise that doesn't fit either. And then you have to rejig things around again and again and again and again. And it just feels like you should be able to twist and tweak the way how these nodes connect instead of being forced into very specific patterns and alignments of all of the different chords as you go along. I would say a good 15% of my game time is sitting faffing around trying to make sure that everything gets fitted into the right place. And whilst that might be part of the puzzle, it started to get annoying. I felt like I should be able to collect the two nodes up together with the chord and then be able to just move the chord slightly so that it could then like not defy physics and wrap itself around stupidly, but there should be some scope for moving those chords around. The other thing as well is that sometimes like you can't clear out old resources that you've had as well. So say if you're reforesting forests, or if you've got like cotton fields or sheep farms or cheese and dairy like places or whatever it is that you're doing, it colours in the world around you and you can't place anything there. There's no way in this game to clear the land whatsoever unless you pick up random nodes and just like cut across and then it carves out a path for you. Now it feels like a really terrible way of having to try and clear out the world around you. It feels like that should have been a mechanic that you could just have in the game to begin with, and that was a bit of a shame to not have available. The last thing, it's a slightly minute annoyance, is that whenever you are waiting for something, which invariably happens quite often, you want to speed up the game, but the speed up buttons, if you're using the mouse control, is exactly where you start to then pan off to the top right of the screen. And so I was getting quite frustrated at being panned off to the side as I was trying to fast forward the game. And I'm sure there's hotkeys, but I forget the hotkeys are there. So I was like, no. For all of my grumbles though, there is a good game here. It's just hidden under layers and layers of tutorialization. And I wish this game would let me think a bit more. I wished it would have a little bit more, a little bit less of the tutorialization, but more of the alerts to say that you're running at a negative for a certain type of resource, for example. It's like its focus is on the wrong thing. So it's busy going, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this to get to there, rather than kind of alerting the reason why it's broken is because you've forgotten to get any milk in, for example, from the cow farm. So, yeah, a few tweaks here and there would make this game absolutely fantastic. It's not far off the mark, but I came in expecting one experience and was given a variation slightly different. And I would say I preferred what I was hoping for, maybe. But yeah, it's a moreish game. I think people will enjoy it. Just be wary going in, it's going to hold your hand all the way. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.